3PNR with Adam R. Welcome to 3PNR. I'm your host, Adam R., and joining me again tonight is Tony Sivalelli. How you doing, sir?
Good, Adam. How have you been, sir?
I've been good. Talking in pre here with the weather here in Florida, the highs, the lows, what I consider to be cold, like 40-ish. So
exactly. I thought it was all relative. I've asked you what you thought was cold, and you said in the 40s. I said that was one of the warm days we had a few days ago here in Michigan.
Yeah, 40 in Florida is in Florida at 40 degrees, you're wearing sweaters and shorts still, right? So
goodness.
Yeah, it's a confusing state to be out here. I've been doing this thing, a couple things anyway. One is I've been paying attention to news. I typically don't like watching the news. I feel like it's nonsense. But this whole thing with Russia and Ukraine, and I don't know what to make of any of that. It's mind-blowing. So, and that being said, I watch a journalist ask a question, or to another journalist anyway, and he's like, well, what does Putin do to save face and back out of this? I'm like, it's almost like he's trying to instigate a problem on the behest of our country. I just don't agree. So that's why, Tony, I don't watch the news, because people like that, what does he do to back out of us to save face? You're taking
right.
a stab at him, right? And you're doing it on the behalf of our country. It's embarrassing. Don't do that.
Yeah, anything political like that, I try to I try to pay attention, but I try to stay away from conversing with it too much. I think, a lot of the media is led in a certain direction, and if it's not followed, then they become previous media people, so to speak. So at least in mainstream, but it doesn't mean it's not important. It's important, obviously, in many ways, because it affects us all, at some point, whether it's economically or, all kinds of things,
Yeah, to prevent a nasty world war, essentially, right? That's the only reason
that could be involved in, relocating, et cetera. There's a lot of things that go on with it. So it is important, but, it's also, to an extent, maybe led a certain way, by maybe certain groups. So,
yeah, I really hope that cooler heads prevail and there's discussions to be had. I hope, we don't have the media make these little stabs. Like I just, again, not to go over it again, but my God, just because you're in journalism and you specialize in politics, don't have an opinion. Leave that to the big boys, right? Let them discuss things and iron it out. Because if you take a stab like that, it's going to, someone like Putin's gonna be like, well, how dare him? I'm not backing down now, right? He's inciting an issue. So the other thing that's happened to me is I've been reviewing more and more cases and reading more cases, ufology and paranormal, and I keep finding parallels, an amazing amount. It makes me wonder why science, why is Harvard not more involved? Like why is MIT not more involved? I think the first guy to find and establish a really good connection and really strong way to communicate with the spirits or energies or whatever they may be. And there goes your 3-letter acronyms. I'll hire those guys in a heartbeat, right? Because that's what better spy is there after that?
Right. Well, I don't really, when you said you're finding a lot of, what did you say, errors?
Parallels.
Oh, parallels.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I think a lot of things, Adam, are just relative. I think different people can see the same thing. It's like when I teach remote viewing. I can have, when I teach, sometimes when there's classes of 2 or 3 or more people, they'll get the same type of what's called an ideogram, and they'll describe it differently when they have to describe it. An ideogram is your first connection to what's called a remote viewing target. And even though, say, 3 people out of 4 get the same exact ideogram, when they go to describe it, up, down, left, right, loop, slope, curve, slant, they'll describe it differently, even though, they're getting the same type of ideogram. So I think a lot of things in how we take into account are how we perceive them. And a lot of that is based on how we're brought up and how we are led to understand what is correct, what is incorrect, what is gray. So I think, there's not always a clear black and white. There's a lot of gray, so to speak, with everything. And I think how people perceive things and then try to construe it is part of that. Even though there are extremes, but there's still a lot in the middle, if that makes any sense. Kind of like the whole thing, you've got life and death, but in the middle there's all kinds of chaos, and chaos is left, right, up, down, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. It's like science, as you're describing it. There is a gray area. I'll say why. There's the initial idea, the imagination, the imaginary part of it. And then on the other side of the spectrum, there's a science of it, the facts. And in between, there's a theory. That's the gray area. It's where you have to put everything together to create a science fact or a science project anyhow. So I agree with that. Yeah, there's definitely got to be gray areas. And perception's a big deal.
It's huge. It's all of it, really.
Yeah, I mean,
it's just like when we opened up this talk right now. I mean, think about it. You said 40 degrees or 45 degrees was really cold the other day. And when we talked just prior to this, I'm like, well, that was the warmest day we had in a long time. And everybody here in Michigan was really happy about that 2 days ago. That's a perfect example.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's definitely a perception. What we can see too. I watch a lot of these documentaries, and some of them upset me. I mean, for the most part, some of them are good. They dig for the point. There's one I watched where this woman, I swear to you when I say this, she said the Navy brought her documents. And I'm seeing this woman in the middle of a desert in a trailer, which I'm not judging her lifestyle, but of all people, the documents? I was like, I want the documents. I'm digging into this. So,
well, the docs of what?
Well, it's to whatever it is that was going on in that area. They were giving this woman documents of stating what was happening in the area as far as ufology goes.
Oh, okay.
So what's going on is a lot of these documentaries, and I've been saying this a lot lately because I'm noticing it more. They're fantastic in nature, right? They're made to entertain, and I don't mind that so long as they say that they're doing it for the entertainment part. But when you're trying to present facts to us, it's causing problems, and I think that's why you don't see a lot more scientists, notable scientists involved with ufology and the paranormal because they don't want to be lopped into the same group of certain people. So that's a problem. Yeah, and it's a problem because I'd spoken to I'd speak to a lot of these science-minded people, investigators off podcasts. They don't want to be on the podcast. Like one of the guys doing a very long-term study, and whatever he discovered prior to, he was a skeptic. And his grandson's really into ufology, and so he wanted to disprove it. And long story short, something happened to him that changed his perspective, and now he's doing a long-term study because he's one of these guys. If he gets one thing, it's not good enough. He needs the science of it for some period of time before introducing it to anyone, which
right.
It makes sense to me.
That's part of what science is. I mean, a lot of science, is really based on replication of what is produced in a laboratory. Can you replicate the results? Can you put it back together? And that type of thing. It has to be replicated, or else there's no, back trail. There's no paper. There's no formula for science. You've got to be able to replicate what you have seen or what produced what you had seen, that type of thing. But it's an interesting story about that scientist. I find that some scientists, as long as they're open-minded, I have talked to several over my time of looking into ufology and remote viewing and things, as long as they're somewhat open-minded, then there's always a case or two that tweaks them a little bit further. And then if something happens to them firsthand, then they have to change their thinking. But it's hard to change your thinking, just on a dime, right. Just out of nowhere. You'll even question your own, awareness of what just happened and ask yourself, did it just happen, type of thing. Right. There's been many scientists and astronauts and people who were not believers in any type of UFO, UAP, USO type of scenarios going on, but after something happens to them, believe me, they're going to think differently about it.
Yeah, and that's pretty much how he put it. He's like, I know what I saw, and I know what I saw through my scope. What I can't do for my colleagues is convey that information to them and make it believable, and which is why he wants to do it.
You can't replicate it. That's science. It's not replicatable. UFOs just kind of show up and then they're gone. I mean, part of that is the whole mystery of it. Why there's no, concrete yes type of, official word on it, even though tens of thousands over the course of time, maybe many more, have seen and been part of this type of thing. And that's not to say, in my humble opinion, Adam, and everything I talk about, or when I say anything, it's all in my humble opinion. I do think there are rogue corporations and things like that, black ops, so to speak, that do their own clandestine type of approaches with using technologies that are perhaps back engineered or experimental. And sometimes that is what happens when things are seen as well. But I also I don't believe, I just really know that the UFO, UAP, and USO has been going on, in my humble opinion, since our beginnings.
Long before. I think I think we're under a long-term evaluation. I think we're being we're the Nat Geographics of space, right? That's what I think. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Just the sheer numbers. And I think this is just one planet, Adam, that's gone through various cycles of development. The old Brahma, Vista, Shiva type of thing from the Hindu aspect, create, sustain, destroy. And sometimes it's because things happen, floods happen, rogue asteroids, solar arcs, things like that. And then the planet could be seeded again. And what we think is a long time, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, 100,000 years, to more advanced races that can time travel or go in and through dimensional openings, it may not be that long. It's kind of like the life of a fish fly. What is it, 3 days? That's a long time for a fish fly perspective, but for us, it's nothing. So there's so many different types of scenarios, I think, that are going on. I mean, it's like, do people say, well, is it this group or that group? There's probably many, many, many different groups that have come and gone, that have bases here, bases in islands, bases in the oceans, bases in the seas, underground bases, moon bases, and then a lot of it may be dis and misinformation as well. It sounds like I'm contradicting myself, but I once heard from a wise UFO person many years ago, there's only a need for dis and misinformation if there is actual information.
Agreed. To the fish fly, those 3 days, understand, for a fish fly, that 1 day is probably a year. It's a long day because it has no distractions. Like, we're in a day for us is we're on our phone, we're on the TV, we're doing a podcast, we're watching. So the day could go by quick for us. But for a fish fly, it's, fly around, eat, mate. That's it.
Right. And it sounds crazy, Adam, but it goes right back to what we talked about right when we just opened this up. It's all perspective. It's all relative to the particular individual or whatever type of life form it is, in terms of time, in terms of space, in terms of temperatures, all those different things. I mean, I think consciousness is relative, to be honest with you. I think the more one is able to expand upon their own consciousness, whether it's through meditation, yoga, mantras, deep prayer, all getting into that state of consciousness, remote viewing, etc. Even that, by gaining that higher connection to a frequency that we're all connected to, we can get more to this later because I think we're all part of a source, creative source playing itself out, then your ability to comprehend what the universe may entail, in my humble opinion, is greater.
Agreed. I agree 100% with that, because I guess with a source, how I feel like there's an architect behind everything, especially when you look at the cosmic web and everything in the universe, and everything down to the spider web seems to have a very common design. And there's that old saying, if it ain't broken, don't fix it.
Right. Science is the same way. I mean, if you looked at our refractor telescope up until 1668, it was just the old pull out, one view straight out. You could see a certain amount of distance, and that was about it. Then you had the reflector telescope by, I think it was Newton in 1668. It's like L-shaped and has the concave lens. Much greater perspective. Then you have all those other type of larger scopes that are in, the different observatories and things like that. And we just sent out I think it was the Walker scope. That's going to be much greater than the Hubble. Our perspective on just our physical universe is going to change a whole lot in the next 2 years because of this new telescope.
Yeah, the Webb scope's going to change a lot. The
Webb scope, James Webb.
They're saying you can see a penny on the surface of the moon from that scope, which is, I got to tell you, that's impressive.
Right.
So,
pardon me for it's the James Webb scope there, but just our perspective in science changes, fairly often, and people have to be going into this area with a much more open mind than they did before.
Yeah. We have no choice, right? We're up against it now because as far as ufology, you know, it's always a fantastic subject, and I'm always fascinated by space. I go to bed at night. I'm one of these people, Tony. I can't go to bed unless there's some noise. So I listen to documentaries. And in one of them, it's this guy, British accent. He's discussing the universe. And in one episode, he's discussing when we were struggling to find out about Neptune and Pluto. Huh. And I'm hearing this documentary, and this is 2:30 in the morning. Now I'm wide awake because, wait a minute. I just saw something where the Sumerians had a piece of rock with the exact solar system today on this rock thousands of years before 18 something when they were discovering Neptune and Pluto.
Right.
And
I'm aware of that.
That's
Adam.
mind blowing that thousands of years ago that was there. So new rabbit hole.
Science won't recognize it because they haven't seen it and they couldn't replicate it.
It's nuts. I mean, for them to have that tablet, and the way it was put on the tablet in perfect order, right? Thousands of years ago. That's information. I don't think they had scopes then. That information was given to them by something or someone. Right. There's no way because we would add this is thousands of years ago. There would have been some fossil record of that being existing, but there is none. So they were definitely educated by someone or something. And I'm starting to think that this happened with a lot of ancient civilizations. Something educated us. And there's been a tremendous amount of events on Earth that have wiped out whole species and whole living creatures as a whole, more than 5 times from what I'm reading.
I agree with that, Adam. I think there's been many cycles of what we would call intelligent life here on Earth. I mean, who can prove it? Who can't disprove it? I mean, I think, shows like Ancient Aliens or different things, like that. I mean, obviously, there's some strengths to that. When you said the media earlier, one good thing about the media is it can get the average person to actually look into something a little bit more concretely, or a little bit more with a little bit more of a mission or a passion. Right. And it doesn't have to be, sometimes it might be architectural that gets a person interested in ufology. Another one might be, a sighting and how a craft moves through the air, somebody who has more of that type of mindset. Another one might be, an abduction tale, and a missing time episode might be another one. So by going into this area with many different types of potential events that could have taken place and are taking place, the more different potentials you have, the more you have for a larger audience to look at it and say, well, wait a minute, I've experienced driving on the road one time and all of a sudden I was somewhere else and it was 2 hours later. They may not get the Sumerian, tablet, but they may get that. Right. And then there's others that are more into archaeology and they've done digs and gone different places and never thought about UFOs. But then they thought, well, that makes some sense because I've heard something similar to that because I've investigated, Native American tribes and to talk about the star people. So there's a lot of different avenues that this can be looked at that perk interest. And I think the culmination of them allows for a lot of different people to start getting involved and start looking at it. And sometimes it often has to be something that basically relates to some aspect of their life.
Yeah. And there's 2 things I'm thinking about in particular. I think it's going to happen in the near future. Thing one, private industry is going to space a lot. William Shatner went up. There's a laundry list of other celebrities who are now trying to get on board with Mr. Bezos to get up there. And if they encounter something, you're not suppressing that. That's going to be viral that moment. So I think they're going to speed up the idea of disclosures. I think that's why they're speeding it up.
I think you're right. I think it is somewhat being sped up.
Yeah, I think so because when Jeff Bezos, if he continues to go to space and he starts having encounters, he's hiring a film crew. That's going to become a series on Prime, right? Right. You can't suppress that guy. He's got too much power. There's no money. What are you going to bribe him with money? Not going to happen.
Right. There's that. And there's obviously, Musk, Elon Musk and his enthusiasm with it too. And they can't all just disappear. I mean, it's kind of like, they can't be paid off type of thing, so to speak.
Well, there's other billionaires out there. Together. There's other billionaires out there watching this take place and they want, they're in the race now. Even Virgin's starting to get involved, There's private billionaires that are getting involved. So
Robert Bigelow, many people have had interest in these.
Well, they're looking at space as a new income. Now, if we could get people to fly and vacation on the moon or just be in orbit, like imagine going on a cruise in the stars, right?
So I think that's probably going to happen before.
Yeah, that's coming real soon.
Too long, Adam.
Yeah, that's the next 5 years. I guarantee that's coming. Jeff Bezos took a celebrity to space, right?
Right.
That in itself should say this. And these are the type of guys. This isn't at NASA where they got to plat something out for like 10, 20 years. These guys want tomorrow. They don't have that patience. Like Jeff Bezos is not going to be like, well, sit back and think about this. Does it make me any good? How do we do it?
Yeah, they come at it more not from a scientific standpoint where it's prodding and probing, and like you said, 10 years, and it's got to go through a bunch of universities and be okay through this group and that group. They come more from an entrepreneurial, I want it now, visionary standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, look what Elon's done in a small amount of time. In comparison to the history of NASA, this he's tripled the efforts in an amazing way. I don't think he cares about aliens. I think I think for him, if aliens finally do come, he's going to, at best, have a meeting with them about the technology. He could care less about where they come from, their biology. I need to replicate your technology. That's his main focus. Where Jeff Bezos, again, I laugh about this a lot, but Jeff Bezos is like, oh, I mean, that's great. Can we get Amazon on your planet? Or
Yeah.
So that would be his goal. Now, here's the other side.
They have a monetary system per se.
You never know, though. Like these aliens, the entities that are watching us, that we're being observed by, there might be on who knows where, other planets with primitive life or life equivalent to us that they're also monitoring simultaneously. We're one channel.
That's why I said that earlier. There's many planets that are probably going through different cycles and are different areas of their cycles. I like to think of it as in terms of the infinity loop. It's constantly going back, forward, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Unfortunately, there's probably a lost civilization.
There's plenty of them, yeah. If you think in terms of this, think in these terms. In science, when we watch nature, we typically watch several prides of lions, so watch how they behave, their evolution, what they do. Now, they've been watching us since our beginning. They find another planet somewhere else, far, far away, and this planet, they're primitive. They're just now getting to their Stone Age. So now they're going to watch that planet. Now they're going to compare notes. Let's see how this planet does compared to Earth, because Earth is super interesting. These people are nuts. Now let's watch the other channel and see how their evolution plays out. And there could be a even more advanced group of people that they're observing just the same.
Right.
Because to them, it's science, right? It's a subject.
Yes,
it's interesting.
Exactly. It's creation. I like to think of it in terms of, when people ask me, where are you at now, Tony, with what you think about what's been going on or what has been going on? And I've been looking at the subject. I'm not saying I'm no expert, but I've been looking at it, and I've had a lot of interviews, own personal experiences, teaching different things about it, lectures about it. I've gotten pretty philosophical about all of it. I think there's one particular energy source that's just omnipresent, that's everywhere and every wind. And basically it divides itself out, and the innate aspect of all of us is part of that. I think our masters knew that. I think anybody who's gone heavily into the aspect of being or meditation or all the different things that come with a higher state of consciousness knows there's a connection somewhere. There's an energy, a network of everything. But I think it plays itself out through countless aspects of its own self. Like we're all divine sparks of divinity, so to speak.
Right.
And I think what's innate within us all, Adam, is the desire to explore and to create. I think that's part of what that source is. Only the source is playing itself out through all of us in many different areas, and some of it is what we call good, some of it is what we call bad. You got to have yin to have yang. You got to have blue to have green, to have yellow, to appreciate anything. You cannot know what you are in the absence of what you are not. And the lower the frequency, and then we're not the lowest, but we're not the highest, that's for sure.
Right.
But the lower frequency that you're in, you need to have a lot of opposites to have some type of a measurement, to have some type of a comparison. But back to what I think is part of all of us, when you want to call it that essence, that being, that soul, that whatever you want to call it, spirit, subspace mind, is to explore and create. And I think that's what the source is. And that's why we like to do things. We like to create artwork. We like to create music. We like to create in the garden. We like to procreate. We like to explore. We like to travel. We like to think about new continents. We like to expand past that the earth is flat. We like to expand past, can we get off the earth? That's just part of who and what we are. And I think that is innate in all of us. And I think that's the essence of who and what we are in the source, creating and recreating. And I think it leads to, once we get even more advanced, Adam, we will become progenitors and seed other areas. And we're probably already doing that in the future, working with what I would call extraterrestrials, if you want to call it that, ultra-dimensionals, etc. So I believe time travel, again, is part of it. But I feel that we're all part of an innate source that is connected to a creative, universal, omnipresent, everywhere, everyone beyond space, time source. And it's kind of like, well, how could you ever think like that? Well, if we have that innate source that we're connected to, it's kind of like a drop of blood. A drop of blood 200 years ago, nobody could tell anything about anything with it. Now, a drop of blood, you can tell a whole, genome, a whole map of the person. So I think we're like that to a source.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
It makes prime sense. And to put it in simple terms, what you described as we are, it's kind of like a virus, spread and recreate. And it's the truth. And, when I say like a virus, it's
you mean life.
Right. It's life itself. Its life is spread around.
Life
and
perpetuates,
right.
and it adapts.
So it's an interesting idea to consider something that's watching us do what we're doing here, and probably multiple other locations across the known universe and probably outside of that, as a long-term study. And even what's observing us probably does not have the answer of what the source is.
No, they're still recreating just on a higher level of existence. Right. And they probably have, in my humble opinion, more of a, how would we call it, a group consciousness that ultimately becomes more and more group consciousness, that is ultimately one consciousness, again, recreating and creating through many aspects of itself.
I'm glad you said that, because here in the near future, Mr. Musk is going to put out that Neuralink. And in the beginning, the applications are, help people have had an injury, walk again, or be more, have a better quality of life. But eventually, Neuralink will have people communicating without words, just images in their mind, just a knowing. And as you just described, I think at that point, when you have people communicating at that level, race, religion, none of that shit matters anymore. Because now we have a knowing. Because when you have just a knowing, there's no reason for personal identity. It just doesn't compute, right? Because now you're utilizing both your subconscious and your consciousness.
The robot in Lost in Space.
Yeah. So it's at that level, we're going to be, whatever's observing us would probably open our eyes up. Like, all right, wait a minute. They're getting to this point where they're communicating, and they're actually, because of this Neuralink and other products like it, they're communicating with just a knowing. So they're not seeing each other as a whether they're black or white or Asian. None of that matters. And at said point, I think that's what communication
that makes sense,
is.
Adam. They're a part of the network, so to speak. But with still individuality. I think the more advanced beings can also be a network of beings, but also respect individuality. But I think the ability to, quote unquote, lie to each other is out the door. And I think that is what keeps us separate a lot. Obviously, fear is a big part of that. But I think the ability to lie and get away with it is something that is, unfortunately kind of prevalent in where we're at right now. Not, as much as before, maybe because things are so connected, whether it be the internet or social media, things like that. But still, lies can be perpetuated and somebody could be, framed or done anything to them type of thing. But back to the civilizations, other scientists are thinking like this. I think it was in the mid 60s that Nikolai Kardashev, and a Russian astrophysicist, presented this on the East Coast, I think it was in New York, about the idea of type 0, type 1, type 2, and type 3 civilizations based on the energies they use. I wrote a book, Ambassadors to the Stars. I incorporated that, but I also incorporated with it the level of consciousness each group would evolve to get to those levels to be able to use those particular energies. Michio Kaku also talks about type 0, type 1, type 2, and type 3 civilizations, a theoretical physicist there out of New York as well. There's many scientists that are more open up to this type of idea. And I think I mentioned on the last show, the idea of black holes, what is above is also below, that there's also entry and exit points to, different realms, the dimensions of existence, because black holes, the theory that Einstein put was that it was an imploding star and that you could go into potentially another realm or another dimension of existence. Well, there's the old saying, what is above is also below. And a lot of theoretical physicists, whether it's people like Garrett Lisi, Clea Irwin, Nassim Haramein, that feel that even photons or electrons have entered at a certain angle or speed, though they can be openings and exits and entries into other realms. And you got to think about it. If these UFOs are coming and going, or they're just disappearing, they're using some type of science. There's got to be some type of quantum mechanics literally involved with being able to do what they do. And it was J. Allen Hynek who said, and I might have mentioned this before, that he had mentioned towards the end of his career, when we discover the secret of UFOs, he said it's going to be one hell of a quantum leap. I think that was a play on words, that the word quantum, as we open up quantum mechanics, the quantum world, we're going to discover that the universe is much bigger than we thought it was, and it starts with what's right next to us, not what exactly is out in space as well.
Sure. I spent countless hours watching documentaries about about black holes, and to my surprise, I heard 3 different scientists have 3 different ideas, and then I try to incorporate all 3 of them for what I think. So when you look at black hole, or as they say, light can't escape it, right? It's that the gravitational pull so great. So
right, in this dimension.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're seeing that. That's like an example. When you look into a water and you see a fish, you're not seeing it directly. It's distorted slightly, right? You're not seeing to the fish. It's typically a little bit lower than what you're actually looking at. For those
that makes sense.
Yeah, whoever goes spearfishing, that's the case.
Right.
Point I make is that's what we perceive. Now, what if we go into the black hole and it's not as dramatic as we think it is? We emerge on the other side. The only difference is it's 200 years earlier.
Yeah.
Or 200 years later.
Right.
So in the idea that the black hole's gravity is so great, it's grabbing the gravity from this side, and then on the other side is the same kind of pull. So when you're traveling through it, it's not so much that it's going to destroy you, because that's only what we can perceive from this side. And I got the idea that, like everything else in known existence, everything has a variation in size. So how do we know black holes aren't the size of a pencil tip, right? Like
that's what I meant by the theoretical physicists that are saying black holes are what is above, the large black holes is below, the photon electron type of entrance type of thing. Like what you were describing going into those black holes, it's like the end of the movie Contact with Jodie Foster.
Yep.
There she is traveling through a wormhole, going back and forth, and 9 hours of time is going by with her. And only, an eighth of a second or whatever it was recorded here on Earth when they were looking at her in terms of where she was going. She just fell through and right into the water. But yet the camera she had on board her craft recorded 9 hours.
Exactly. Now, that being said, I had this really interesting conversation with Steve Murray.
And that's all Carl Sagan, too, by the way.
Yeah. So Steve Murray and I had this discussion about frequencies and vibrations, and when you're seeing UFOs and why they're lighting up and whatever frequency vibration you're using, it's changing the gases and the elements around it for that lighting, right? And for simple words. And so now think about when they're traveling, if they're using a higher frequency and different vibrations to manipulate at a quantum level black holes for them to travel through. It's
right.
Not that they're
just be something like that.
Right.
Like gravity and magnetics, definitely.
So now we go full circle back to the paranormal. I think in the next decade, we're going to have a lot of answers to the paranormal. We're going to discover, we're going to really discover the energies that are around us, because now we're talking about quantum physics.
Exactly.
And when I had a guy, or actually I read about it, and then another guy tell me about it. Well, one side just says because of their particle collider, and there's no way there would be here, we detect it. That's not true. We don't know how it operates. That's you're saying that because of applications that you understand now. But like everything else in the past, What we didn't get then, now we get it because our science is caught up to it.
Right.
You know, so that's, we have,
Yeah.
I think in the next decade, I think the energy of beings around us, whether they be from here previously or they existed on this planet long before, some form of energy, I think we're going to discover that really, really soon. I think so.
I think we're getting closer to these type of things every day. I think Arthur Clarke, you know, back in the 50s or early 60s, he said, today's magic is tomorrow's science. Today's science fiction is tomorrow's science.
Yeah. You know, before I started this podcast, before I even got interested in the topics more, right? Let's rewind to even, let's say a year ago now. I thought a year ago now, when you died, your computer turned off and that was it, right? Period. And as I've done my research and I've interviewed people in podcasts and I've read, I paid more attention and learned as much as I could from not just current times, but dating back thousands of years ago.
Right.
I've
Very
evolved.
smart.
I've evolved a lot. Especially when you learn about frequencies and vibrations. That's why when
Yes.
the 432 hertz and other different hertz, and you put sand on a piece of metal, and when you apply those hertz through that piece of metal, the sand makes perfect geometric shapes. How the hell's that happen? So for me to see that,
Right.
and then try to perceive the idea of what we're total energy inside of ourselves, everything for me has changed.
Yeah, everything is energy. I think like I said, the source before. I mean, it's very interesting, Adam, I think it's fascinating you've been doing the podcasts for how long now, sir?
About almost 7 months.
Okay. And look at how much your perspective on things has changed since then. Probably quite a bit.
Yeah, a significant amount. And a lot of it, Tony, it's because I don't have a default, right? I'm not set in my ways. I don't like, that's it. I can't because I know. I don't know. And the biggest thing, even in I like shooting pool.
But you can open up and say that, like that scientist you talked about before that didn't believe in any of it, and he had to prove to his grandson or his nephew or whatever it was.
Right. He
didn't come from the same default you did. The scientist that has the rigid mind that something is a certain way and that's it.
Right.
But he's going to have to change, obviously, and you will change quicker because you didn't have the same type of default that he had, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. So I was saying I shoot pool, and I do pretty well, but I will always learn something new, always. So just from that perspective, you could always learn something new. That's why I don't believe in just putting your foot down, and saying, nope, I know, and that's it. I'm not willing to learn anymore. That's crazy talk.
Right. You
have to learn more. You have to be open-minded to whatever, or otherwise what's going to happen is you get to these people, or they know that they know, and then when it hits them in their face, it's not like they're accepting they're going to learn from it. It destroys their life.
Right.
And it makes them a miserable person.
There's an old saying, and I think it goes something like, blessed are those with an open mind. No truth shall dishearten them.
Yeah. It's the best approach. And so that, again, putting these scientists in this category, why they're, even Avi Loeb, when he first saw the Oumuamua, that thing through the space that passed us by, he considered to be moving intelligently and has the ridicule he probably got from it and the pushback from amongst his peers. If you give your peer, if you're giving him shit for having an idea or a theory or even pursuing this, then you can't call yourself a scientist, because science is the discovery of something, right? It's not, there is no facts.
Exploration.
Right. You have to continue to explore and do science to learn the most you can. You can't. I
totally agree with that, Adam. Nobody should, a fellow scientist for opening their mind. And, but you know what? That's always gone on, whether it's been Tesla or Einstein or many, 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 many names throughout history were always challenged. I mean, look at how the church closed its books on Galileo, Giordano Bruno, Copernicus, et cetera, but they have changed their mind now, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, Bruno was killed for his belief system, and it turned out his belief system was accurate.
Absolutely.
But that's a period of time where, there was religious law.
But we're in a period of time where there's scientific law. That's not necessarily true either. The current time is not, the be all end all, whether it was 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago or many, many thousands of years ago, starting with stone tablets with Neptune and Pluto on it for this particular cycle of human beings. That's another, that's relative, because we may think right now, we think we're at the heads of science, where 20 years from now, they're going to look back and say, man, these guys didn't know what was coming their way. And it's so obvious right now.
Yeah. Another big thing too, and I've been reading more about it, learning more about it, is how many governments I didn't know this either, but the governments across the world in their search of ufology and paranormal is a little bit more open in the United States. And it's because they don't give a shit. They just want the facts. They're not worried about they don't care what you're going to look like in public.
Maybe we have more to lose than potentially there, because, I try to be objective with it too. And some people don't like that, but the whole thing about UFOs, I don't know if the powers that be, powers that were, certain powers that want things a certain way, I don't know if they really don't want us to know if there's ETs or ultra-dimensionals or to travel and through space and time, etc. I think maybe they're just more concerned about the energies that are being used, and then how this would be looked at and opened up to. So, is the world ready? I don't think consciously, and I get, some grief from this, at certain times, that the world is really necessarily ready for that type of energy to be put out just yet. Sure. I think they're ready for, there is somebody coming from point A to point B, or that there was somebody here in the past. I think we're definitely more and more ready for that. But the energy aspect of it, that would be very dangerous right now, because we're, pretty violent as it is.
Yeah. And I say that a lot too. And, to what we were saying earlier about other countries have less to lose, and it's true. But the idea that they're willing to take those leaps and do those things, it's a brave thing. And that's why those countries are on the rise. Not long ago, there was a country that said, hey, we want to be free, and we want people to express themselves freely. And we don't want to pay another, so we dared to jump out of that and do something that was completely unacceptable to the world. And we became our own country. Now, you go to where countries are investigating the paranormal and ufology openly, and, so they have less to lose, but they might be the future. And that might be the truth, because
that's right.
The reality is,
and there's different truths out there too. Again, truth is based on perception as well.
I agree. And, Norway and Sweden and Finland and some of the studies that I've read about their ufology out there, this isn't like some hidden A-tip somewhere. There's real buildings with real people who have real jobs who look into this, because it's not just that they're fascinated, but something's going to fly in and out of our airspace, and we got to know what that is. They're uninvited. They're here uninvited. So
there's that angle to it as well. But I think ultimately it gets down to, if a person's open-minded enough, Adam, like yourself and most of your listeners, they just want to learn. They want to know. They want to explore it. Again, like we talked about earlier, it all gets down to, we have an essence within us that wants to learn and wants to explore. And this is, what greater picture can you look at in terms of, life elsewhere, intelligent life elsewhere? What can we learn from them? What can they learn from us? What can we learn from the history of it? That's such a fascinating topic to so many people. And you're going to get more and more, whether it's countries opening up to this, universities here in the United States, even the U of M has some type of a free, but it's a UFO type of course that can be taken. It's like a several-hour course. This stuff was all unheard of, 20 years ago. Sure. People have an interest. We ourselves are going into space. We can't stop what is innate within all of us. Sure, there could be a tragedy. There could be a solar arc. There could be something that could happen that could set us back, only to be reseeded again. Even if people do survive it under the ground or on a moon base or whatever, and they take charge again for a little while, you're not going to stop the inevitable. The inevitable is we are all part of a source, a creative source, and that essence of us which is part of that, likes to explore and likes to create. Yeah.
And another big part is our new generations. We are evolving. The new generations, absolutely. It's that culture. There's huge numbers that are online video gaming, and they create their own identity. They create their own genders. They create their own appeal, right? So I think that generation, if aliens touch down and there's a meeting, I think the first day or two, like, wow, I can't believe it. Can you believe this? And like, all right, cool. I'm gonna go back to my game.
You know? That would be part of it. The other part of it is, we're going to want to know, well, how do you get from point A to point B? Let's say we get past, they're here. That's the dangerous part.
Yeah.
What type of energy are they using? I mean, we have problems with gun laws right now. Could you imagine if a lot of people got their hands on this type of power or energy? And I'm, as much as I hate to say it and love to explore and understand there's a bigger picture, we have to get a little bit more evolved consciously.
Yeah.
We have to evolve consciously. We have to be able to get along, so to speak. And I think we are better now than we have before in many areas. Let's face it. Many, many years ago, the only people who could vote were white, wealthy American, male landowners. But we've come a long way in all these type of things. But we still have to evolve consciously so we don't take too much too fast with the technology that might be coming along with the understanding of others that have been coming and going here for a long, long time.
You're right. I agree
How
with
do we
you.
get past that consciousness?
I had a conversation with a friend not long ago. We were talking about cancer and why have we cured cancer yet? And then I sat and thought to myself, what if we did? What if tomorrow some guy out of a university got it, dropped the mic, found the cure? How many millions of employees and institutions and buildings and billions of dollars of a lot of nonsense goes into cancer, a lot. And if you cure it tomorrow, that all closes, right?
Right. Absolutely, Adam. You are 100% correct. And that's why I said before, and I felt, all along, and I think the first show I was with you, I think there's two sides to this that are quote unquote somewhat in charge here on this planet as it plays out, even though there's a higher architect and a hierarchy of beings behind more of a creative aspect of it. But, I think one group doesn't really want anything to move forward very fast, if at all. And another group wants things to come out, but at a slow pace over the course of generations, because you just can't go from no, something is not true to yes, it is true overnight. There's got to be a sequence. There's got to be a slow indoctrination period over the course of several generations that says, well, maybe, and I think that's where we are towards the end of it, maybe this is true with the whole UFO, not of this earth, as I like to call it, not of this earth intelligences.
Yeah, who's under big threat is fossil fuel corporations, right? Because now, you get these
like the cancer type of thing.
Yeah, you get these beings down there, and they're like, wait a minute, these guys are traveling how, and it costs them nothing? What?
Right.
And that's
there's no money in free energy.
Yeah, huge explosions. They're like, well, what are we going to do with all this oil? Leave it where it is. It's fueling the planet, I guess. Stop it. Like, that's why Elon gets a lot of shit. And before him, a lot of companies where they were trying to use alternatives to fossil fuel, they didn't last long.
This has been going on for a long time, from Tesla to Tucker and the automobile. I mean, there's many people.
Yeah. So the point I make is, if maybe, I wonder how much pressure on the government there is from these big corporations. Like, look, we're not talking about them or their technology. We're not ready yet, because if we do, we're going to take a hit. And a hit, because if we do communicate with them directly and we find out how they're using energy, I have to believe, if you're traveling the way they are and doing the things they are doing, the resources are not like ours, right? It's not something.
Absolutely not.
It's definitely something more at the scientific level that it can almost replenish itself.
And it revolves quantum mechanics.
Right. And especially if you're using frequencies and vibrations, like it's
right.
You can't bottle that up. So
no, but we are gaining. And part of the situation is it's all relative to beings that are part of the hierarchy, that are putting some of this, orchestrating some of this, so to speak. They may live thousands of years, but we only live 90, 60, 75, 100 years, and then it's back to the relative aspect, back to the fish fly who lives 3 days. So for us, this is taking too long, but for beings that are maybe working from the higher frequency, the orchestrating the whole project genetically and technologically, maybe it is moving pretty fast compared to where we were 100 years ago.
Oh, easily.
We're moving so much faster. We were using horse and buggies for thousands of years. And now all of a sudden we are taking trips into space. So that's all within the last, so many years. That's why the more I've gotten into this, Adam, I think things like the Roswell crash and other crashes, Roswell is, fairly well known. There's a lot of other crashes that have taken place throughout the globe over time that I think are almost types of gifts, if you don't want to use the word gifts, hand downs, things to where we start using our brains more and science more, where we start back engineering and putting it together. So these beings who are watching and looking at this, okay, now it's time for them to take the next step. How far do they go? What are they going to do with this? Think about it. Why all these crashes? We can do things with electromagnetic fields and gravitation or centrifugal forces, et cetera, and bring some of these craft down. But I think some of them are just they're being put here or crashed here with subordinates or surrogates, gray type beings that are not alive, but somewhat android robotic type of things with those type of beings as well, even though there's many groups that have and may use beings like that, and there may be beings like that themselves also.
Sure.
But I think they're handouts, to get us to move. That's why there's never really one side that gets too far ahead of the other side, so to speak. And maybe the United States has kind of got a good grip on a lot of these things, and maybe the other countries don't have what the United States has per se, and maybe it's time travelers or other dimensionals and ETs grouping together doing this and allowing this to take place. But sooner or later it's going to all catch up, and the sides are going to be probably more on an equal playing field.
Agreed. We've only been playing with cars and airplanes for 120 years, give or take. That's it.
That's nothing.
So it's only been around 120 years. We've only been broadcasting for roughly 100 something years. And it takes about 100,000 years to get a radio wave across our galaxy, let alone the universe.
Using the technology we have.
Well, we have, right. Now, at some point, I think that someone played with something somewhere and caused, because information could travel way faster than physical.
It's like thought.
Right. So if in that idea, I wonder how many, Nikola Tesla was on a different level of thinking.
Yeah. And he may have been communicating with a different level.
Right. And so to him, because he didn't, especially with our brain, I say this a lot. I think our brain, again, it is the most complex computer on the planet currently.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It definitely has reception factors. There's no question there. Because if you look at the construct of it, it looks like it'd have a receiver. So perhaps like some of these brilliant minds were receiving downloads, and what other people hear them saying, it sounds crazy. Oh, that's crazy. He's crazy. But the information was so. Now, if you took Nikola Tesla's information then till now, it would start making sense.
It's like Da Vinci before that.
Right.
Different people, definitely throughout. I agree with you, Adam. There's different people that have got these downloads, or genetically they are at a disposition where they can take these downloads. It may even be something more that was predispositioned in the genome program as all this is going on and orchestrated, so to speak. And we may be able to be we might be like the idea of thumb drives, where you can just take one aspect of a person's energy and put it into another. That's almost like the incarnation, reincarnation, but it's probably going on simultaneously when you really look at it. We can take a thumb drive from one person's computer and put it into another computer, and all of a sudden you got everything that's there because it's energy and it's downloadable, and now science can read it, right? Yeah. Why can't that be done with an aspect of ourselves?
I think it can be. We're just not, a lot of people on this planet, I think everyone on this planet has the ability to be psychic.
Yes.
We don't utilize that part of our computer, our brain. And I say this a lot too. I've read so many cases of someone having a traumatic car accident or some head injury, and they're doing miraculous things like playing the piano or speaking another language, right?
The famed psychic Peter Hurkos fell off a ladder painting in the mid 60s, and he was, pretty darn good at guessing what people had on them money-wise and when their wallet, IDs, different things that happened to him. But it wasn't after he fell off of a ladder and had this injury that all of a sudden he had opened up another aspect of his being to be able to do this.
So like your brain, your computer, like other parts of your body, when one part is damaged, another part has to compensate.
Yeah.
And then now you've opened up that part of the brain that utilizes those receptions. Like I talk to a lot of detectives, and a good amount of them say, well, I had an instinct or I had a feeling. Like at some point, own it. Why did you have an instinct that 20 other guys didn't have? It's because you're utilizing. It's what makes you a good detective. You're utilizing a part of that receptor in your head.
They're not shunning it when it comes, and they get that feeling, that
right,
spontaneous, like I like to call it in remote viewing, when students are viewing. All of a sudden something might spontaneously happen, and then the next thing you know, they're sketching something out, and there's the target.
Another example too, Michael Jordan. I just watched a series called The Last Dance. You should watch it if you haven't. It's amazing.
What is it called?
The Last Dance on Netflix.
Okay.
It is amazing. It's inspiring. If I swear to you, Tony, I was sitting at home one day, I wasn't feeling that good. It's like, I'm not feeling that good. I'm not going to do anything today. I watched that series and I felt like shit. I was like, this guy played a finals game with food poisoning. And so he was able to psychologically take himself to great levels to be a competitor, do amazing things. Still spoken to this day. The point I make is, there's certain people on this planet that they have that X factor, and it's because you're utilizing that part of our computer, our brain, that other people don't utilize to do these great things. And it's not that no one else could do it. No one attempts to. They're not open-minded to it. They don't want to allow that in. You got to be able to open up. Yeah, you got to take that leap, because I mean, so there's other people too that
I agree with you 100%.
How many scientists had this revelation, this wonderful idea? Boom, they got it. And I often hear about an inventor here that invented something, and somewhere else on the other planet they invented something, and almost simultaneously. And then at some point you have to accept the idea collective consciousness is at play.
We do. It's like the back in the 50s, the first fellow to run the mile in under, I think it was 4 minutes, did it. And then I think Roger, I can't remember his last name, maybe Bannister. And then the next thing you know, I think a fellow named Landry somewhere in Europe as well, or maybe Australia, just a week or two later ran the next mile. He ran it in under 4 minutes, and then another one did. Yeah,
and especially with ideas too. Like
oh yeah, that's even faster.
Yeah, like there's the whole dispute about Alexander Graham Bell and then Meucci and who invented the phone. Yes. Who's to say they didn't do it at the same time? Collective conscious, right? It's in it. That energy is floating around.
There's a network,
and these two guys happen to get the download. And the rest of us didn't.
The internet is a network, but we ourselves are energy. We are a network. It's kind of like, when I talk about, the whole story of Frankenstein and Mary Shelley. What was the last ingredient that she needed that was put into the body for the being to come to life?
Oh, yeah.
Electricity.
Yeah, I never considered that.
When you're a paramedic and you're having a heart attack, what is the thing that they get out? A defibrillator. What does the defibrillator put in you?
You know what? I'm glad you're saying this. I'm glad you're saying. I'll tell you why. Because when you look at the brain and the nervous system, I'll be if you just erase the matter, the tissue, and just look at the nervous system and the brain, you would definitely think, oh, that's a computer system. There's no doubt about it. It would appear that way. And what else does that need? It needs energy to pass through.
We are probably complex biological computers, but we have this, predisposition belief that, whatever, the old, back to the religious type of thing. And I'm not saying good or bad with that, but we've got to get past that too, because we might be sophisticated biological technology. It doesn't mean, again, we're not saying God here. I used to believe, now I know per se, we're all part of that innate ability to connect to the source. So obviously, I'm coming from that angle first, but there is energy involved, okay? And the energy that we have that measures here, we measure it in terms of protons, electrons, neutrons, quarks, gluons, E8, et cetera, et cetera. So we have it in the way we understand it in a little bit more, how should we say, palatable terms, layman's terms, electricity.
Yeah. My brother is a psychologist, right? And him and I have these conversations. I was telling him one day, I'm like, when you get a grain of salt and you break it down, it gets smaller. And let's say you sit there and hammer on it over and over again. At some point, it's not that you can't see, it's not gone. You just can't see it anymore. Its size is
our five senses.
We can no longer perceive it because it's gotten that small. And because of some of these amazing, like what is the magnoscope, I think it is. It's an electronic microscope, and you're seeing things that are even smaller. And even then, one of these doctors seeing the image of a great
atomic microscopes, even a Large Hadron Collider.
Yeah, so I'm seeing a grain of salt that's extremely small, right down to you can't see with the naked eye. Point I make is, even in that image, you could see grain, and you could still see texture, which means it could be broken down smaller.
But even in that image, Adam, it goes down further because we've got mass to molecules to atoms to subatomic particles, and then you got the electrons going around the inner part, which is the protons, and the neutrons, which is the nucleus, and then inside of there you might have things like quarks, and gluons,
and this is the things,
plasmas, and then on the string theory, M theory, and down to maybe even E8 into other realms.
Right, and all that we're saying right now is the best that we know.
Right.
And now flip that around, and I had this thing happen to me a month ago. I was learning more about the universe and the idea of our universe as one sphere amongst other spheres in a greater void.
Yep.
And when I watched, by the end of that documentary, I felt so insane. I was depressed. I had to watch it. I was.
No, you're part of it all.
Yeah, but like when you look at it, I was like, wow, like you realize, like we make such a big deal of things in our direct life that
we do. We're relative thinkers.
Yeah, we're really missing greater pictures.
Objectivity.
Yeah, so
is needed.
I hope moving forward.
And that comes with consciousness.
Yeah, and I hope moving forward we start thinking like that as a whole.
Yes, that's when you have that network of beings moving into from a type 0 to a type 1 to a type 2 civilization, and we'll be able to communicate more through each other, through feelings, ideas, things like that.
Right. So
less lying.
In the world of paranormal, right? When we're investigating the paranormal, there's this thing that I try not. I guess the best way to put this into words, I go on and I look for scientific studies. I can't seem to find anything at all. Ufology, I get a good hand amount, but it disturbs me that there's not like, and it's, you know what, the responsibility.
I think if you look into quantum mechanics more and look at people like Nassim Haramein, or definitely look into him,
right?
And I can send you a link. You're going to see that there are other scientists that are now coming out with this type of thinking.
Yeah, I'll definitely send me that link. So I'll tell you why. I go on YouTube sometimes and I'll type in evidence of the paranormal, and it's always the same shit. Like a bunch of people these videos are making, and I could tell it's not real, you know. And then there's those few little nuggets out there. Like I was just talking about it with Mike Huberty on Monday. It was the thing that's upside down. I don't know if you haven't seen it, I'll send you the link. But it's the one video I seen on YouTube that gave me the chills. Because I couldn't explain it. I put it into my computer to the best of my ability. I tried to look at the image, and I couldn't make any distinctions. So that was the one, because you could hear that guy was physically disturbed by what he came across, and it was broad daylight. This wasn't like nighttime. It was I think his name's Cody. I'll try to send you the link.
Across?
I found it on YouTube. Here, let me do this. Here we go. And I'll send you a link to it. And
thank you.
Huh. I'm gonna have to look through my. Well, regardless, I'll look.
I'll definitely get back to me on that.
Yeah, I'll look through my history on it. So I'm typing in the same words. Now I'm not seeing the video, and that's bothering me. So anyway, I looked at these videos, and there's a good amount of them. You can just tell. Like I don't know. Maybe not vetted paranormal investigators, but the average people I'm seeing, you definitely have a chemical response when you see something.
Right. Well, you're moving past the average investigating, Adam. You've gotten so much information downloaded, but I still think all these lighter, investigating groups, etc., still have a place, because there's still the people that are just beginning to understand the idea of it, and they need to start somewhere. I
agree. Look, there's a lot of people that come on the show, and this is what I like doing on the show. One thing I promised myself to do for the first year, I want to speak to people on the ground floor that are out there putting in the work and the time, right? And you, in the world of ufology, you got a lot of MUFON people. I mean, these guys the diversity is great. I meet people like you that are very, deep thoughted, and you're well versed, right? And you're great to speak to, right? And I meet other people like you.
That.
Yeah. And so I enjoy the conversations because it allows me to think more. And then it allows me to dig more. So because I don't want to lose faith. And I saw a woman on TED Talks explaining how her ghost, she had I guess a ghost in her house, but then she was trying to disprove it. And I thought to myself, like, oh, maybe your incident, but by you saying your incident was not real, You just basically told a bunch of people on the planet they're all liars. And that's you can't do that.
It's from a fear base. They just don't want to believe it, maybe.
Perhaps, or she has an investment in something religious. I'm not, but as a scientist, you really shouldn't be invested too deeply into anything. You should make room for the new, right?
Oh yeah. Blessed are those with an open mind.
Yeah. I mean, it is science, right?
Yeah, eventually it will be. It's all energy. Science is just the way to explain it. It's like when you're talking about the dimensions before. People say, well, how can that possibly be a dimension? To me, it's frequencies. You said it before.
Yep.
You put your hand behind a fan that's not moving. You have a fan blade. You put your hand behind that fan that's not moving. You can't see your hand. Now, you turn that fan on full speed, obviously do this safely. All of a sudden, your hand's there plain as day, but yet the blade is still there. It's the frequency that the blade is moving that you can't see anymore.
Yeah, and for people that want to know more about, especially frequencies at when you vibrate, look at water and the different shapes water take depending on the frequency, depending on the vibration. So there's a lot to make room for. A lot.
Yeah. There's some open-minded scientists. I'm glad you brought up the thing of water. I mean, you look at water and you look at a fish and they can move through water, but they can't move through air because their whole biological circuitry is wired differently. But we can move through land. But you look at a bird, and how does a bird glide through the air? I mean, how is it when their wings are not flapping, they can just sit there and glide? There's got to be something, and this is just my thinking, that maybe they're connected to, that they're not gliding through the air, but they're steering through the air because they can pick up on another type of energy or frequency that allows them to do it. How can a bird just stay up in the air and just be there gliding? I know when they flap, they're moving around, but birds glide as well, correct?
Yeah, and well, they're lighter than other animals, so they adjust their wings to catch the wind, almost like a what is that? Wow, not a parachute. A kite.
But their brain is able to circuit the way to steer it.
Though. Right. So like a kite, they could steer themselves through the air. But that's their program. That's what their development was for. So that being said, before we close out, let's talk about remote viewing. Because I've read a bit about it, and it's not just that the government experimented with it. They did it for a long time and probably still do.
Right. And our first definite interview that you did with me, and again, thank you for that. I went into that pretty well in depth. Spent maybe 20 minutes going through a brief history of it, which started back in the early 70s with the physicists out of Stanford Research Institute in California there, mainly Russell Targ, Hal Puthoff, and they were with Charles Tart and a couple others. And then they brought on the renowned psychic from the East Coast, Ingo Swann, who was also a gifted artist as well. And then what they did, they just put together protocols and phases that went from the subconscious mind to the conscious mind, then onto pen and onto paper. And they called that remote viewing. And remote viewing was the name. And then Stanford was also a think tank for various corporations, including the military. And then the intelligence community got wind of it. And they approached them and said, you know what, we've been doing something like this ourselves on the side. They gave them an exploratory grant. Stanford was up for that. They brought in a couple other scientists that had an interest in the paranormal. There you are, paranormal, scientists in paranormal. They brought in several other so-called psychics, and within a few short months, the remote viewing procedures were tweaked, and the military met up with them again and said, you know what, we're still impressed. And they asked them, do you think you can train some of our people who have been dabbling in this a bit back and forth? And, Stanford Research Institute said, yes, we really feel we can do it. We'd like to do it. And that was all part of the grant that they got, which was quite a bit of money at that time. So the military put together a group of people, and then they interviewed several of those. There was quite a few that they interviewed. They ended up choosing 6 to begin with at first. And what the correlation was with most of the 6 is that they had some type of paranormal thing that probably went on in their life. They found out near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, UFO sightings, ghostly sightings. But anyways, the people at Stanford with Ingo Swann and Pat Price trained these 6 military people who became part of the psychic warrior program that the United States put together, and it went on for nearly 21, 22, 23 years, and it went under various names: Project Grill Flame, Gandola Wish, Project Stargate, Project Centerline, etc. And the year of Spies was born, and this went back and forth for quite a while. And then in the early 90s, some of this started to leak out in the general populace, and the History Channel got wind of it and fellow by the name of James Schnabel was sent out by the History Channel after the History Channel spoke to Stanford and the military, and they didn't deny it, and they were okay with having a documentary on it. And so the History Channel went to work and put that together, and it came out, I think it was in 93, and it was titled The Real X-Files, which was the same year the TV series The X-Files came out. And after that came out, the cat was out of the bag, and the military had a backup plan, and they hired a third party, a neutral third party. And after a few months, they came back, this third party, and said, you know, we don't think it's worth the resources you're putting into the program. We'd advise you just shut it down. And this was after many different people went in and out of the program. And so they officially closed it down, Adam. It was in the mid 90s, and then I had first got wind of it in the 96, I think it was. There was I did not see the History Channel show, but I did catch this show on Nightline TV on Channel 7, I think it was ABC, and it was a half-hour documentary. And I remember watching it and thinking to myself, wow, who would have thought this? The military was working with psychics and psychic phenomena. So I kind of kept it in the back of my mind. And I was in the beginning stages of really looking into UFOs and the potential of extraterrestrials heavily back then. And then I came across the History Channel repeat of The Real X-Files, and I remember watching that and thinking, again, it was after a couple of weeks, who would have thought that? You know, it was on another time, another show is showing it, so there's got to be some truth to it. And one of the real things that caught my attention was that one of the military remote viewers was talking about when they really looked at, sensitive targets, so to speak, things like underground missile silos, biological weapons depots, nuclear submarines, things of that ilk, that these craft, these lights intelligently controlled, were coming in and out of these remote viewing sessions that multiple viewers had gotten, you know, a sense of. And they called them UFOs. And I thought, wow, that would be a really great way to look at the idea of UFOs and potentially extraterrestrial. So I went out and tried to find the book, James Schnabel's book, Remote Viewers, The History of America's Psychic Spies. And I didn't find that initially, but I found a second book, to my surprise, by a professor at Emory University named Courtney Brown. And he was a teacher of nonlinear mathematics and social sciences. And I read that book, and it was very eye-opening to me. The first part was about training. The second part was about Brown and one of the former military remote viewers, how they teamed together to use the tool of remote viewing to look at the idea of UFOs. And they came to the conclusion that there was not one group, but several groups that were coming here, Adam, and they had been doing so for a long time, and their agendas varied. And at the end of the book, they had a number that you could reach, and I called an office and had some questions about the book in case I had questions, and they thought my interest was sincere. And so they said, why don't you come out here and do a class of learning this? Scientific remote viewing was called at the Farsight Institute, and I just didn't think I was ready for it. So I hung up the phone, thought about it, and I took a course in meditation because that was part of what the conversation was if I was going to go out there, and because I wanted to do that. And I reread the book, and it was roughly 6 weeks later, I finally gathered up enough courage to do this course in scientific remote viewing, the introductory course in 1997 at the Farsight Institute. And it was very eye-opening. And then I went from there to the Monroe Institute to learn of the out-of-body experience. And we talked about wavelengths and things like that. Our brain operates on wavelengths. There's the delta when we sleep, it's below 4 hertz. And then there's the theta, which is called hypnagogic, it's between 4 and 7 hertz. And then we've got the alpha, which is between 8 and 13 hertz. And then we've got the beta, which is your waking brainwave state, between 14 and 32 hertz. And what we got going here is when you listen to these sound waves at the Monroe Institute, you've got binaural beats going on. One that is where you can hear consciously between 5 and 20 hertz. The other is subconsciously below 1500 to 1000 hertz. And what that combination does, Adam, it creates a binaural beat inside your brain that creates a cerebral wavelength that has a neurological effect that allows some theta brainwave transference to the beta waking brainwave state. And what you do is you record dreams a little better. You can maybe remember what's called out-of-body experiences. And I found out also that the Monroe Institute was a prerequisite for all military remote viewers, as was the course of Transcendental Meditation, which I took prior to going out to the Farsight for the scientific remote viewing. I went back to the Monroe Institute in 98, and I took another week-long course there in Faber, Virginia. I had instruction, also guest instructors Joe McMonagle and Skip Atwater, who were part of the military remote viewing program, so they had helped me out. Then I went back to the Farsight in 2002, a more advanced course in remote viewing, learned how to teach it. So I've been teaching it since 2002, practicing it since 1997, and I think it's a great way to expand one's consciousness and awareness. It also can be fun. When I have students, they do have fun doing this, but they got to get past that. Am I ready for this? Like I went through myself, and another way to explore, another tool.
Before you got to remove the word paranormal, right? Because really, what that is, that's parallel to our normal. What you're describing is so when you remove paranormal, people that listen to this, it sounds like broadcasting, right? Or echolocation, very similar. So it makes me wonder, when you're remote viewing, are you broadcasting and then you're allowing other sensories to join that, like your vision, right? It's got my real curiosity now.
We talked about it before. And honestly, Adam, what is described, what remote viewing is now is different than it was 10 years ago.
Right.
And it's kind of like scientists, people who are heading remote viewing, they think, oh, it's this way, it's this way. It's not any particular way. We have good ideas about it now, but the way we describe it now is different than it was 10 years ago, which is different than 20 years ago. And like Russell Targ said, it was just called non-local perception by different, yogi masters and different types of people that practice that type of process with consciousness many thousands of years ago. It's really nothing new, but scientific remote viewing was the ability at Stanford Research to kind of replicate this, as we talked about earlier, in a laboratory setting. And then it came with the process of going through protocols and phases that which happens, Adam, is they keep the conscious mind occupied all the while the information comes to and through to the subconscious mind. Then you record it from there, from pen to paper, and that's how you get your results. And there's always the mind that's involved, the ego that wants to name and guess. And we have a place for that. It's called deductions, but it's a process that takes anywhere from about 40 to 60 minutes at the most to go through the different phases, which are 5. I teach them all. They're on a video course, 11 different classes. It takes approximately 12, maybe 15 hours. You take the video course, but I complement them with 3 live sessions, one-on-one. I do the introductory class with the student, and then I do almost a midway, and then I do one closer towards the end, and I make sure every student knows how to do this on their own, and then I get them a bunch of different targets that will be downloaded that I have, and then they can go through this back and forth. And of course, a person like myself or other instructors are always available for one-on-one sessions as well. So it's definitely a way to help awaken one's being, to explore one's consciousness. It's just another tool. Even though I teach it, I can't be relative and say, oh, it's the best tool. It's a good tool. There's no question about it. Students often surprise themselves. But the toughest part is getting past the fear part of it, to just get in there and just do it and follow the program. Follow the protocols, follow the phases. And I think it's the type of electron interphase that we all have. It's like a double slit experiment, how the electrons can intercommunicate with each other. That was going through the test, that's the science that's behind it, late 1800s with Thomas Young to Ingram Taylor in the early 1900s to Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberger back to the Copenhagen experiment in 27, where they proved the electrons, they go through the double slit, come back together. And then it was David Bohm and Josh Stuart Bell after that at in Geneva, Switzerland, and then it was put off, and other scientists, I believe, in Paris in early 1980s that did the experiment of the double slit. And once it went through the double slit, half the electron went through it. They influenced the spin of it with a laser on one half of the half that the electron, half the electron went through this double slit. They influenced it to spin a certain way. Well, the other half of the electron at the same time, Adam, would spin the same way and vice versa. So they knew there was some type of an electron interphase going back and forth. And we're kind of like that, like twins. They know when something happens, one could be halfway across the country. Some of this is documented. The twin telepathy book that was out a few years back, has these different type of cases. One person will know exactly when something happens. It has to be usually a high emotion type of thing that goes on, positive or negative, but they'll know.
I agree because
Guy Lynn Blair is the author of that book, by the way.
I agree, because when I was talking about earlier about collective consciousness, I read all too often about these great minds creating things, and it's always within the same timeline. It seems to be the first person to get a patent wins. And it's not like they're cheating or copying off one another or just stealing it. It's like some energy's out there, and then it's connecting the people all across the globe.
About the scientists, you are correct, Adam. It's that we work that way. We're a network ourselves. And that's part of what remote viewing is. You just have a target. You have a certain amount of your aspect of your being that gathers this information. It's almost like you work like an antenna, like a receiver, and you get this information. Part of you is out bringing it back to another aspect of your essence, and you record it. You just got to get past the conscious mind, but there's ways to do that. That's why it's called scientific remote viewing.
Yeah, and it's definitely, you know, I hear this, and people like you and a handful of others, I guess, you know, or not guess, I know, it's okay to have remote viewing, because I think about some people out there that should not have it. You know? And I say this because there's people out there that just, they, like you're for the good of people, but there's other people like, yeah, I'm going to watch them.
Appreciate that.
I'm going to go inside the bank and see what they're doing, learn all the codes, you know, like.
It's all, you know what, great point. It's all, it's never the tool. It's always the intent behind it.
Right.
You know, it's kind of like a hammer. A hammer can be used for something great, to build something, or it can be used violently. It's, you know, it's kind of like fire. A fire can be used to heat a person, warm up a meal, etc., or it can be used violently. It's never the inanimate object itself or the tool. It's always the intent behind the user or the person who's exploring and how they're going about it. Do you agree?
I agree. I saw a bumper sticker not long ago that says, "Guns don't kill people. I kill people."
There you go. Yeah.
And I remember seeing that bumper sticker, like, well, let's not run this guy's path. You know what I mean? So,
right.
Anyway, Tony, before we close out, is there anything you want me to add into it?
No, I totally appreciate your open-mindedness. You're a great host, and I'm thankful that we've had these conversations, a couple of them here in the last couple of months. Hopefully some of the information that we shared and that I've been able to be privy to over my 25 plus years of investigating, learning, experiencing, teaching, and always a student myself, of course, is helpful to some of your listeners. And if any of them are interested in, the book I have, I will do a plug here. It's Ambassadors.
Oh, yeah, do it.
My website is www.learnremoteviewing.net. I'd love to have some of your listeners become students. If they want to explore remote viewing, I'm sure I can make it happen for them. And I think some of them will surprise themselves. But again, thank you so much for having me on and to share with your listeners.
Not a problem, Tony. We're going to do it again because you have a lot of information and there's a lot to talk about. So we're definitely going to do it again.
I'm glad we got into the philosophical part of it. I think it's a little different than what is the usual talk that I give, but I like to talk about it because that's where I'm at right now with my own state of being. And I think that can be somewhat helpful to some of your listeners as well. And you are obviously doing that as well because you've had so many great guests for a period of time now. And it's incredible how you have the energy to do 3 shows, 2-3 shows plus a week sometimes.
Yeah.
I can't keep up with them.
I'm a pretty aggressive person. I got to learn. Tony, it's been great. We're going to do it again. Everything Tony mentioned earlier, I'm going to have in the description. And we'll do this again, sir. Everyone have a good night.
Thank you, Adam. Much appreciated, sir.
Not a problem.
By your listeners as well.
Thank you.